I'm very pleased to be sitting up here with two very badass people in their own right. And they may not be Instagram stars, but they are running massive companies in the hospitality and tech world. And so I think one of the interesting things about where we are with data, and we've heard a lot about this throughout the day, is that there is finally tech and hospitality are catching up to each other. And hospitality is finally being poised to do something with all of this data. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk to both Krista and James heading up global companies and really what are your perspectives on what data is out there, how are you managing it on your teams, and then thirdly, how are you making decisions with it? So without much further ado, welcome James and Krista to the TechTable stage. Thank you for being with us. And I'm really just excited to, Krista, start with you and just say, you've been at OpenTable for a little over a year and you have an amazing background at companies like Disney and running the game sector for them. And so I'm just curious to hear a little bit about that background and how you thought about data in previous roles and then how you're thinking about data now at OpenTable.
Yeah, so I have a weird mix of backgrounds in the sense that I have done both, intense startup, frenetic environment, VC-funded back things to really large, companies. So Disney is a 90-year-old media company. The company that I had been part of that got bought into Disney was it was a gaming company, but it was essentially a data company masquerading as a gaming company. And we built data from the ground up, fresh stack. And it was sort of a part and a way of life. I mean, there's that phrase of, if you have data, bring the data. If we're going to use opinion, let's use mine. And I think that there is an element of that. And I really wanted to have data really be one of the loudest voices in the room. And it goes across the organization. And so every department needs to know their data. So this is, HR doesn't get a pass because they're dealing with people. They have to know their data. They have to know the retention rates, the attrition rates. They have to understand. And if you're not capable of bringing that data, then we're not really part of that modern organization in terms of running it. So I'm a huge believer in data. And I think one of the advantages of OpenTable is because of our scale, the immensity of data that sits underneath the organization. We're almost 40,000 restaurants. We have 20 million diners a month, but we have over 100 million people coming to our web properties, our mobile apps properties. So there's just a ton of data coming in. I think we record about 1 billion data bytes every day, several terabytes of data that equates to. So it's coming in. I would say that we haven't always done as much to relay those insights out to our partners and our customers, and that's changing. And that's the really exciting thing about when I look at the forward-looking for OpenTable, things like our restaurateur app, which I think I had it out, but I won't bore you guys. But it's, our consumer app is about 8 years old. Our restaurateur app is about 6 months old. But we're seeing just insane, we talk about social media. Facebook, the average Facebook user goes to Facebook 8 times a day. The average restaurateur goes to our app 8 times a day. These guys are obsessed with it. And we haven't even integrated things like point of sale yet, which are coming very soon, which will give you a sense into the revenue and operations of your business that hopefully at the end of the day helps you grow your business. Because if we're not simpatico, then neither party is going to be successful.
Speaking of revenue and operations, James, you manage over 30 restaurants with Jean-Georges globally, and that's a huge perspective to have. And I'm just curious to know, we were talking the other day, and you told me an anecdote about how you were at Mercer Kitchen when they first installed OpenTable in 2003, I think. And so you've seen a lot in the last 13 years, and I'd love to know just how your own perspective has changed on data and how you think about it, where you get it, what are your sources, and what do you look at?
Sure, thank you. These days we carefully examine all facets of the business by utilizing as much data as we could review on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. OpenTable in particular has been a wonderful partner of ours. We're very careful with the way we program our availability online, how we take a close look at table combinations, theoretical availability, whatever it may be. Avero is another partner of ours. New Brand Analytics is another partner. So There's so much information. We take a close look at as much of it as we can and make quality decisions, but I think it's also the quantity of decisions that have really sort of been facilitated.
So how do you hone in on those quality decisions, do you think?
I think, I mean, it depends specifically for what. If it's, we have the luxury of having so many restaurants that we could benchmark against each other, whether it's in the same city or according to productivity with service staff or product mix. So depending on the circumstances, I think in particular when it comes to revenue management, we carefully look at cover count comparisons, average check, and then week over week, year over year, and then take a look at guest perception of the brand, availability.
Yeah. Okay, so you have all of this stuff and you have a team that you need to manage taking all this stuff and making it actionable. I'd love to hear from both of you as there's greater and greater importance placed on all of this. How has that opened up new roles or departments on your teams?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been changing things up, and we hired a new head of restaurant product recently out of LinkedIn who understands truly the productization of data. So it's nothing if it's like a bunch of stuff, where's the tail and where's the dog? So it's like if you have a bunch of stuff getting thrown at you, but you can't do anything with it. And so when we even call it on our roadmap, it's called an actionable insight. So insight without the ability to pair it with an action, because we know the restaurateur is busy. They're running around. I mean, just having everybody, on the team run and sit through a shift, you appreciate just how intensely busy these environments are pre-shift, during shift, post-shift, and we need to be able to not just present you the data, but then here's exactly what you need to go do with it in a bite-sized chunk. And that's why I think, again, the iPhone app has been so groundbreaking, because we're seeing people pre-shift going in there and saying, oh, let me manage these reservations, let me add this VIP, let me notify someone, let me change this reservation. And so that's, just from a productization of data, but also the data science. Chip talked about this earlier around the importance of data science. I mean, it is the wave of the future. When you think about where we have been, so there was the PC revolution, and then there was the internet revolution, then there was a mobile revolution, and we are just on the cusp of what I would call the AI kind of machine learning revolution. I mean, we were starting to see little bits of it. I mean, watching my kids interact with the Alexa is alarming in some ways, but interesting. And so we have to have data science. And so, we're going to have a machine learning component for the next 10 years. And so it's like getting those people, there aren't that many on the planet. And so getting those people, cultivating those people, having intern programs that drive those people are going to be critical for, frankly, any company who wants to be able to deliver the best of breed products. And that's where we're positioned to do.
Yeah. And then James, for you, I mean, I think data used to live maybe in IT world, and now in restaurants, everyone is responsible. So how do you allow information flow to work more cross-functionally amongst your teams?
We just try to facilitate access across all departments and try to communicate and plan and communicate based on the data that we're given. So for instance, as I mentioned earlier, as it pertains to revenue management, if we have certain goals that we've set for the day, the meal period, the revenue center, we'll go ahead and share that information not only with managers at the unit level, but with hourly staff, and make it as interactive as possible and try to create a collaborative sort of process when it comes to reviewing it and trying to determine reasons, for the critical findings or whatever they may be.
Mm-hmm. And then what about, I mean, maybe for both of you or either of you, how do you really motivate your teams? I mean, Krista used to be a CFO, and I'm assuming you have a naturally analytical mind. But how do you get people excited about data in this new frontier?
I mean, I think it's just the power of it. I mean, you had asked us, and we were chatting before around, when I was at Disney, I was running the games group, and there was two radically different fields of thought. There was one group who was like, I'm going to use data to develop the concept, I'm going to test everything down to the color, to the words, to the whatever. And then we had a bunch of people who were like, I'm an auteur. I don't need data. I know. And both were incorrect, truly. And I think, there's some examples that I see when I talk to restaurants as well. It's I don't need data. I know. But it's like, how do you take that point of view? Because everybody, this scenario where it's all data and no point of view, that doesn't work either, because there's not a sample size large enough to get through your failures to get to the point where you can actually demonstrate what the customer actually wants. So I think what you need is a very strong point of view coupled with data. So how do I take this, it is garbage in, garbage out too. So I need people who have a very strong point of view, who do believe, but are willing to react and respond to that data and say, hey, okay, let's iterate and move. And so I've also, I think, for a long time, OpenTable was a little bit of measure twice, cut once. And so there was a fear of risk taking. And I think what I'm trying to move is, let's go, let's push it, let's get it out there. We were chatting last night, it's like ship, and then we'll get the information back, and then we will iterate quickly as a result of that data. But you need both. It is a little right and left brain, frankly.
Yeah. So James, true confession, when do you trust your gut instead of a report?
Well, I think we try to create a collaborative process. The organizational landscape has become a flatter one over the years, and I think it's important to have all the information at your fingertips. This way, when you have discussions where you're going to review information, data, it's not a fact-finding discussion, but it's something that you're prepared, you're looking at all the variables, whether it's again, getting back to covers across meal periods, across revenue centers, and we say, well, it looks like breakfast is off by 3% for the last month compared to the previous year. Well, what is it? Is it the server? Is it the food? Is it the menu? Is it the guest experience? And I think part of it, you have to sort of lean on the people that work there day in and day out and get a sense from them whether it's what their opinion is. But then if you take a closer look at it, and it's quite obviously non-alcoholic beverage sales, for instance, as it compares to food sold, or coming up with some sort of cappuccino per omelet sold, or whatever it may be, as a variable that we benchmark across the group, and we'll get a better sense of what the answer is. But yeah, the sensibility, I think, engaging guests, employees. So
we have the data, we have the people, and now let's talk a little bit about the actual decision-making process. And I think from OpenTable's perspective, as you mentioned earlier, you're looking at so much. You're crunching. You could be focusing on everything under the sun, but many of your clients are very small businesses. So how do you balance kind of thinking about that global scale, especially with Priceline, and what you could be providing, but really delivering more actionable things to restaurants?
Yeah, and I think there's two sides of that story. I think what Priceline helps us with is really on the consumer side. They're in 220 countries around the world. We are trying to expand on the diner side to truly be the global dining passport, where you wake up in Berlin, Dubai, Tokyo, and you have a curated experience that is tailored to you. Chip talked about that earlier too. If they have 90,000 homes in France, what are the 20 that are relevant and pertinent to you? So I think, winnowing it down, so customization, personalization. So that's on the consumer side. I think again on the restaurant side, we're looking and watching and paying attention to what are our restaurants interacting with. So I think it boils down into a couple of different things. First of all, it's like, know your business. So what's going on? What's Tuesday look like? And if it's running 3% below, you better understand what those implications are. Then it's operate your business. So, we're trying to do things where, rethink inventory management for a restaurant. But again, we're doing some tests with machine learning, and we're seeing interesting results. Like, we're seeing a 16% increase, a 20% increase here, 12% increase here. These are really meaningful growth. And if we can take these to the point where we take the data and we say, hey, you're running low, here's a recommendation, push a button, go. It has to be that simple, because the complexity of what sits behind it should be our job, but the simplicity and presenting a decision for you as a restaurateur should be your job. And then the final thing is so your business, operate your business, and then how do we grow your business with you? So if you are running low on a shift, is there a way where we can harness the demand channels that we have to put people in your restaurant? It is perishable inventory. If you don't sell that 5:30 slot, it matters. And if we can keep you busy at those times, especially off-peak times, then that can be the difference between profit and loss. And so we want to be in position to help you achieve that.
Yeah. And so James, as an operator, whether you're on the floor or helping one of your GMs make those decisions, what are the types of decisions that you're able to make in real time? Or are there things that you would love to be delivered in real time?
Well, again, I've become a student of OpenTable, and I think that's allowed me to focus on service, and service matters most during service, and focus on the guest experience, but without taking a very careful look at OpenTable and Flex Mode and pre-plotting your availability over the course of a week, a month, an hour, creating some scenarios where there's expiring sort of blocked slots, leading up to the service, and you know that the system's doing the work for you, so you don't need to make those decisions during service. That you're confident in the framework that you've put into place. So we re-examine that weekly and daily in some instances, depending on how we're performing from a cover count standpoint, and then during service, I think. We're in tune with open menu counts. We're in tune with how many guests are seated, how many guests are expected. Everybody's keenly aware, from the maitre d' to the manager to the chef, of what the goal is for the day or for the night. So we're taking a look at open table metrics. And then towards the end of the evening, of course, we're looking at labor cost management tools that we have at our disposal in real time. Overtime countdowns, what else as far as that's about the extent of it, and I think that's part of the nuance of being a good operator and a sharp operator, and just creating the spirit and amongst the crew and the sommeliers and the guests to make calculated risk decisions if you need to in the moment, because you're so prepared from a data awareness standpoint.
So for both of you, I think we started mentioning the consumer side a little bit, and one of the things that I think is so interesting, not only in the hospitality space, but in general in the world, is that consumers are becoming much more educated about what data they put into the hands of businesses, and how does that come back to them. And there's a greater expectation for how that gets received and how that gets, how that benefits them. And so I'm curious to know whether you've seen kind of the previously known creep factor start to disappear, and whether you think the promise of better service or a better experience outweighs the creep factor of giving someone your personal information.
I mean, I look at it, it's all about control, and so and awareness. And I think when you look at Facebook, in the past, they haven't always been good about doing that. Now they're really good, and they say, here's what's coming, and they're really in the data. I think similarly, we have to give our diners control. They have to know what is in their profile and how they want to be communicated to, and if they don't want something in their profile. But ultimately, it's a give-get, and if we don't take the data and do something with it, then the consumer isn't going to trust us. And I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to demonstrate the, hospitality, frankly, that can come from having the right data. And I was sitting next to Danny last night, and we were, talking about, connecting all the dots. And a lot of this information is knowable. In some ways, our restaurant software is part CRM, part inventory management solution. And I think that putting these together in such a way that helps you connect the dot. And we were joking about the notion of there's technology and touchnology. But it's
He's going to be embarrassed.
He's going to be embarrassed. But I think it is about being able to have that human connection and that human moment. And how do we do that such that the technology can reside in the background to enable you to, have that guy whispering, like, do you guys watch Veep with the guy in the background whispering, like you want that in a technology, but you don't want it to kind of take the experience, because dining out is one of those most extraordinary things that you can do, the breaking of bread across the table. So how do we get that information to power you in that moment? And so we're seeing consumers are fine with it. I think younger consumers expect it, and so we just need to make sure that we give our diners control.
Look, I agree with most of that, and absolutely, I think it's the manner with which you share the information or obtain the information and then communicate with the guest, and whether that's understanding what their preferences are with tables or with food or beverage, or their experiences from previous visits, and then using that to your advantage. We have certain guests that have profiles that we don't have enough printer paper for sometimes, and we'll run out mid-service. But I think that's important, and I think the servers really appreciate that, having that information and being armed with that immediately before they greet a table, understanding that they don't have to go through and stumble over a few miscues. So that's really important. I think and everyone appreciates that. The extent to which I think everybody's different, and then depending on the brands which you trust and which you feel that allegiance to, there's a greater willingness to share and it won't feel as creepy. It's I think everybody can attest to that. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, we have time for a few questions from the audience. I'd love to take some.
Stump them.
Hi, you talked a lot about data at OpenTable and your new approach to it since you've come on. Have you guys thought about making the OpenTable data available to other service providers or other companies who might want to create other products and services to enhance the hospitality experience?
Yeah, the first part of the question was whether we'd open our data pipelines. I think it's probably a case-by-case basis. We already do have partners that we interact with where they share in the OpenTable data. And I think, we're not going to be able to do everything for a restaurant, and we recognize that. And so, but we are, an important screen in the restaurant. And so, how do we interface with the right partner to be able to bring data to those partners over time? I think is really important. The notion that we'd have a completely open API where we're just, letting anybody come in and see everything, unlikely. But it is, it's important. I mean, we deal with, on the consumer side, we call them our upper funnel partners, but, the stuff that we're doing with Google, with Facebook, with Apple is really interesting and extraordinary. So we're showing our data to Apple now on an Apple map. If you see a restaurant, you hit it, it'll go right into the OpenTable app. Just really cool and interesting things like on Facebook's, and there's some interaction with the data. So how do we work with these partners to deliver a really good consumer experience? On the restaurant side, there's some data partners but it's probably case by case.
Right here. But then no one can hear you.
Hi, Pam Dillon, Wine Ring, Wine Preference Technology. Can you talk about the difference between what consumers buy and what they prefer? I'd like to draw that distinction because what somebody actually buys may not be what they like or don't like in the end. How do you think about that?
It's a tough question. And obviously that's data that there's a lack of, in the field as far as I'm aware of, or a lack of readily available data. So, we rely on a lot of our staff and a lot of the traditional methods to understanding whether or not guests are enjoying a product, and I think we take a look at product mix to sort of get a better sense of what guests are enjoying and what they're not enjoying, and then again having the ability to benchmark that across restaurants that serve similar products and have a similar sort of collection or selection of wine in particular, let's say.
And I would just bring data into it, right? There's feedback loops around, when somebody rates their, restaurant experience after the fact, and so we can get a sense of that. Some of our restaurants, we have point of sale integration, and so we can readily understand, okay, is this, what are people buying at this shift? Does that match with then any feedback? And the other interesting thing that we're doing on our reviews is to parse them into categories. So we'll get like a 5-star review, and then they'll make a negative comment about the service, which is not great. So we're trying to apportion our reviews and pull those out to say, okay, what was about the service, what was about the food, what was about the decor, what was about the overall experience, so that we can say and piece these things out. So then it's like, okay, if I'm spending a lot for the meal and I'm having a negative commentary around the food, then that's interesting. And it's like, how do we give those insights back to the restaurateur to make those adjustments as needed? Because I think you're right. How do you get inside the mind of the consumer? And you might just have an amazing server who's great at selling, and they're selling something that the consumer may not end up buying or liking at the end of it, or preferring it, I guess is your word. And so how do we make sure that there's feedback loops and necessary modifications that can happen as a result?
Right here? Oh, can you wait for the mic just so we can all hear? Thanks.
I had a question back to your point earlier about the creep factor versus customer experience. You know, we've been seeing as venture investors more companies looking at bridging online with offline and looking at how much time you're spending in locations. I'm curious, like, what your own thought process is about. If you have this data, is this something you think consumers are comfortable with, and are you exploring any opportunities to see how to marry offline with online behavior?
I mean, I think that there is some cool stuff that's, I mean, the creepier, like Facebook has an ad, like we're very focused on travelers because we're part of the largest travel company in the world. So we're always looking at that information, and Facebook has an interesting ad product because they know when you're home and they know when you're outside of a 200-mile radius from your home, and they can say, hey, we can show this ad to this person because we know they're, on a trip. And that is kind of creepy on the one hand, but I think it goes back to making sure that you control. And I think again, consumers would be shocked to know how much there is, but I think on the other hand, we're certainly not like keeping the data of how long these people are sitting or not sitting. I mean, I know restaurants certainly keep data. We know. I mean, there's the term camper that will sit on certain of the guest notes, and we've structured data around campers and then not allowing campers to continue to make reservations. I mean, there's interesting. I don't want to speak for you. I don't know how you deal with those.
Jean-Georges does
The campers. They don't deal with campers.
Sure. No, yeah, but I think it goes back to having guest preferences and doing our best to tailor it with the information that we've got, but still trying to create a personalized and thoughtful experience without making it so data-driven. But I think that'll continue to become more and more dialed in with specificity as it pertains to specific wines that the guest did or did not like, or specific dishes, and how they. How long they like to sort of take before they place an order, and so all of that's really important. And I think internally we do our best to, even when we're quoting a time on the wait list, before we do so, would like to kind of collect the walk-ins first and last name and get a sense of their history and their preferences, and if they had any historical, experiences within the organization that'll lend us some insight before we quote them a 45-minute wait for brunch at a restaurant. Yeah.
Time for one more, yeah, sure.
Hi, Krista. Three-part question for you.
Oh.
Or not. Just curious, the pay at the table test that OpenTable has done, just curious about learnings from that, what the inhibitor has been to rolling that out to more restaurants, and how you're able to incorporate that data into decisions that restaurants make.
It seemed like one long question.
more optimistic,
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, pay is super exciting. I mean, I think, but we are in year 2 of the 7-year journey on pay. So when you look at adoption curves for things like ATM utilization, online banking, anything that has to do with money, you see these really flat lines for a long time, and then you see it curve up. We just passed the 2-year anniversary of Apple Pay, which everybody assumed would be a radical game changer, and it's making waves, but I think it hasn't changed everybody's behavior in this room. I think Tim Cook still has to bring his wallet when he goes out to a restaurant at night. And the thing, so what we learned on pay is, first of all, it is magic. When you're in a restaurant and you can see the items showing up on your phone, and at the time that you are ready to depart, you slide a button and you go, and it is magic. The challenge is, we have to be point of sale integrated, and so it's taking longer for us to be able to do that. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to give restaurants a reason to go and integrate their point of sale with OpenTable. I think that there's cool stuff that can be exacted from this, which is we do see turn times shorten, which can again be the difference between profit and loss in some instances, especially a more casual concept where the pace is that much faster. But we're continuing to innovate, and we believe it's important to be there. Everybody wants that Uberization of the restaurant experience. We've all had those horrific moments where you've waited for the theater, or I've got a couple of kids, so you gotta go. And so I think that there's those moments where we believe it is the future of where we need to go. I wish it were faster, but we're going to continue to be there. We're leaning in, we're innovating. I'm going at this problem 3 or 4 different ways because I so believe in what it will ultimately yield for the consumer and for the restaurant. I think it'll help operations, but it's with all things related to money, it takes a little time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting what the sort of, what the landscape will sort of evolve into with Apple Pay and OpenTable. And I think once everybody begins to embrace it, it's going to create a much more seamless guest experience and an operator experience as well. So we're really looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Lauren.